My twin sister Rose always had this habit of doing things for me, like showing up to my retail job when I had panic attacks or pretending to be me. At gynecologist appointments I really didn't want to attend, so I should have known something was up when she suddenly needed my help. She slid an entire box of original Pokemon cards, including the shiny Umbreon I'd been hunting for months, across the table and said, "I need you to be me at the D&D club, because I told everyone D&D was for virgins, but now I want Gale to like me and he runs it." My twin sister Rose always had this habit of doing things for me. She'd show up to my retail job when I had panic attacks, pretend to be me at gynecologist appointments I really didn't want to attend, so I should have known something was up when she suddenly needed my help. "I need you to be me at the D&D club." I almost choked on my ramen. Rose, the girl who hated anything nerdy, needed to be there? Why? Gale runs it and I really want him to like me, but I accidentally told everyone D&D was for virgins. I need you to win him over. It made sense. Gale was mysterious, artistic, and had this dangerous quiet boy thing that drove girls crazy. "I've never even talked to a boy before," I whispered. That's when she smirked and revealed what was behind her back. An entire box of original Pokemon cards, including the shiny Umbreon I'd been hunting for months. I hated how well she knew me. "Please? He's so cute and he'll never talk to me after what I said if I don't do something." Against every instinct, I agreed. His family was moving after graduation. We only had 2 months to get this show on the road, and this wasn't our first rodeo of pulling a twin swap, but in the past, it was always for exams, chores, boring stuff. Never this, never romance. Rose had to dedicate one whole weekend to teach me how to flirt like her. "Just remember the rules," she coached me in front of our mirror. "Giggle more, touch his arm when he makes jokes, flip your hair," she demonstrated, looking effortless. I tried and looked like I was having a seizure. "Check your phone sometimes." I would never pay full attention to dragon talk. I practiced her laugh. It sounded like a dying seal. "And don't get too nerdy. I wouldn't know what a paladin is." 3 days of practice later, I stood outside room 402 where the D&D club met. Gale's smile was enough to melt away my nervousness. "Hey, didn't expect to see you here." I attempted the hair flip, dropped my dice bag, giggled at the wrong time when he explained character creation. He looked confused but stayed patient. "I made this in case any new players showed up. A tiefling rogue, my favorite race and class combo." I bit my tongue to stop myself from squealing. "Actually," the words tumbled out before I could stop them, "I think I'd rather multiclass into warlock later." His eyes widened. "You know about multiclassing?" he asked, leaning forward. I panicked and played dumb, but the damage was done. He started inviting me everywhere, and soon, the sessions became everything. We expanded beyond Thursday D&D, Friday afternoons at the retro arcade where I forgot to lose at Street Fighter. Saturday mornings spent building his gaming PC, our fingers brushing over circuit boards. "You're full of surprises, Rose," he said one day at the comic shop. I was arguing why Batman could never beat Superman. "Different how?" My heart hammered. "Good different." We binged anime during lunch. His favorite was mine too, something Rose called weird cartoon corn once. If you know, you know. The escape room should have blown my cover. I solved puzzles in record time while he watched with a small smile. "You're kind of amazing," he said. Rose's texts got desperate. "Giggle more. Stop solving everything. He's supposed to feel smart." I ignored them all. Late night Discord sessions were the worst. We'd game until 3 a.m. and I'd forget to use Rose's higher voice. "You sound tired," he'd say. Different, but he never pushed. During our second to last session, he walked me to my car. "I've never met anyone who gets this stuff like you do," he said quietly. "It's like you see inside my head sometimes." It took everything in me not to confess right there and then. The final session was at our house. Rose wanted to eavesdrop after I told her how well things were going. Sigh. Gale was packing up when he handed me a small box. Inside was a custom miniature he'd painted. My tiefling rogue, but with details only I'd mentioned in passing. The constellation pattern on her cloak. I looked up at him, tears threatening to spill. "I need to tell you something," he said, tucking my hair behind my ear. "I know you're not Rose." The world stopped. I bolted for the door. "Wait," he caught my arm gently. "I've known since week 2. Rose wouldn't know the Konami code." Before I could process what was going on, the basement door swung open. "Finally!" my sister practically squealed. "Do you know how painful it's been watching you two dance around each other?" My brain short-circuited. "What?" "I knew you'd be perfect together." She counted on her fingers. "You're both hopelessly romantic nerds who think no one will ever love you." "Rose, what the hell?" "Also," she grinned wickedly, "Gale isn't moving. His family never was. I made that up so you'd stop being a coward and actually talk to him." I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the basement floor while my brain tried to catch up with what Rose had just said. She'd orchestrated everything. The Pokemon cards, the fake deadline about Gale moving, all of it just pieces in some twisted game where I was the pawn. You planned all of this?" The words came out cracked and thin, barely louder than a whisper. My chest felt too tight, like someone had wrapped rubber bands around my ribs. Rose bounced on her toes, her grin stretching wider. "Of course I did. You think I'd actually call D&D a virgin thing? Please." She laughed, that bright tinkling sound that usually meant she'd gotten her way. "I've seen your browser history. I know exactly what fanfiction you read at 2 a.m. The words hit like ice water. She'd been going through my computer, my private searches, my saved game guides, my carefully hidden folder of character backstories I'd written but never shared with anyone. All of it had been material for her scheme. I jerked away from Gale so hard I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. His hand fell away from my arm, and suddenly I could breathe again, even if each breath felt sharp and wrong. "How long?" My voice shook, but I forced myself to look at her. "How long have you been planning to use me like this?" She rolled her eyes, that dismissive gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she thought I was overreacting. "Oh my god, don't be so sensitive. It was just a few weeks of planning, maybe a month tops," but I knew her tells. The way she glanced up and to the left when she stretched the truth, the way her fingers tapped against her thigh when she was hiding something bigger. "Weeks?" The word came out high and sharp. "What about the gynecologist appointment last year? The panic attacks at work that you mysteriously needed me to handle? Dad's boss dinner where you had food poisoning that cleared up the second I got home?" Each example made her smile dim a little more, like watching a light slowly fade out. "How many times, Rose? How many times have you used me as your stand-in when things got too hard or too boring or too beneath you?" The last words tasted bitter. Beneath her. That's what I'd always been, wasn't it? The backup sister, the spare, the one who could be slotted in whenever Rose needed to be in 2 places at once, or more accurately, when she needed to be somewhere she didn't want to be. Gale stepped forward, his hands raised like he was approaching a spooked animal. "Hey, maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this. There's obviously been some miscommunication." I whirled on him, and all the anger that had been building for years finally found a target. "Miscommunication? You knew I wasn't her and you just, what, watched me make a fool of myself? Enjoyed the show?" My hands started shaking. That familiar tremor that usually meant a panic attack was coming, but this time it felt different. This wasn't anxiety. This was rage, pure and clean and absolutely justified. That's not, Gail started, but I was already backing toward the stairs. No, I'm done. I'm done being Rose's backup plan, and apparently, I'm done being your entertainment too. Rose reached for my arm, but I yanked it away, the motion sharp enough to make her step back. Don't touch me. Don't follow me. Just leave me alone for once in my life. The words hung in the air as I ran up the stairs, taking them two at a time. My chest burned with the kind of panic that had been my unwanted companion since middle school, but this time it mixed with something else. Relief, like I'd finally said words that had been stuck in my throat for years. In my room, I twisted the lock and slid down against the door, pulling my knees up to my chest. The position I'd perfected during countless anxiety attacks, except this time I wasn't trying to disappear. I was trying to hold myself together. My phone started buzzing immediately. The screen lit up with their names. Rose, Gail, Rose again, then Gail. I held down the power button until the screen went black. The silence that followed felt like the first honest moment I'd had in months. No performance, no pretending, just me, alone, exactly as I'd always been. 20 minutes passed, maybe 30. Time got weird when your world rearranged itself. Then came a soft knock, careful and deliberate. Honey? Mom's voice carried that particular gentleness she used when she knew something was really wrong. Rose told me what happened. A laugh escaped me, but it came out bitter and broken. Of course she did. Rose tells you everything, after she decides what story to tell. There was a pause, then Mom said something that made me freeze. That's why I want to hear your version. Your version. Not Rose's interpretation. Not the family-friendly edit. Mine. I turned the lock slowly and opened the door. Mom took in everything. My red eyes, my shaking hands, the way I held myself like I might shatter if I moved too fast. Without a word, she pulled me into a hug, the kind that didn't require me to hold myself up. She's been doing this for years, hasn't she? This whole twin swap plan feels way off. Rose says she wants help with a boy she insulted, but then she's teaching her sister flirting techniques that don't even match her personality. Mom's words were quiet against my hair. Using you when it's convenient. The understanding in her voice, the recognition of something I'd never been able to name properly, broke something inside me. The tears came hard and fast, the kind that made your whole body shake. I just wanted to help her. I managed between sobs that felt too big for my chest. She's my twin. We're supposed to be a team, but I'm so tired of only existing when she needs something. Mom held me tighter, her arms steady while mine shook. I know, baby. I should have stopped this years ago. Your dad and I, we thought it was harmless twin stuff. We were wrong. She guided me to my bed, sitting beside me while I tried to remember how to breathe normally. The mattress dipped with her weight, familiar and comforting in a way that made me feel 5 years old again, back when problems were smaller and Rose and I really were a team. You know you don't have to forgive her, right? Mom smoothed my hair back from my face, her fingers gentle. Not right away, maybe not ever, if that's what you need. The permission to be angry, to stay angry, felt like something I didn't know I'd been waiting for. All my life I'd been told to make peace, to understand, to be the bigger person. But maybe sometimes being the bigger person meant recognizing when you'd been made small. But she's my sister, I whispered, the words automatic. And you're her sister too. Mom's voice carried an edge now, protective and fierce. That should mean something to her. The fact that she keeps using you, lying to you, manipulating situations, that's not okay. Family doesn't mean accepting harm. She brushed my hair back one more time, the gesture achingly familiar. Your dad and I are going to talk to Rose. Really talk to her this time. After she left, I sat in the quiet of my room for a long moment before reaching for my phone. My stomach dropped as the screen came alive. 37 messages. Most were from Rose and Gail, walls of text I couldn't face yet. But scattered between them were notifications from the D&D group chat. Cannon Banks' message made my stomach twist. So were you lying to us this whole time? Was anything real? Below that, RedditMorty had written what looked like a full paragraph about trust and the sacred bonds of gaming groups. Even through text, I could picture him pushing his glasses up while typing it. Juan Pope had just sent a sad face. Somehow that hurt worse than the accusations. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I forced myself to type. I'm sorry. I lied about who I was. I understand if you don't want me back. I hit send before I could delete it, before I could overthink it into nothing. The typing indicators appeared immediately. Cannon Banks was already responding. That's not an answer. Were you playing a character the whole time, or were you actually into the game? My throat felt tight as I typed back, trying to find words that might matter. I love D&D. That was all real. My excitement about the game, helping Juan with his character build, the backstories I wrote, all of that was really me. I was pretending to be my sister because she asked me to. I'm sorry. The typing indicators appeared and disappeared for what felt like forever. Someone would start typing, then stop, start again, then nothing. Like they were all trying to figure out what to say to someone who'd been lying to their faces for 2 months. Finally, RedditMorty responded, "This is a serious breach of trust. You've been lying to us for 2 months. That's not something that just gets forgiven because you apologize." His words stung because they were true. There was no rule in the player's handbook for this. No saving throw against consequences you'd earned. Cannon Banks added, "I need time to think about this. Don't come to next week's session." My phone buzzed with a private message. Juan Pope. "I'm hurt too, but I remember how happy you looked when you rolled your first nat 20. That seemed real. I wanted to thank him, to explain, to apologize better, but I didn't know if I had the right to even respond. Everything felt broken, and I didn't know how to fix it. Maybe some things weren't supposed to be fixed. Maybe they were supposed to teach you what not to break next time. Then I heard it, shouting from downstairs. Dad's voice, which never got raised, carrying up through the floorboards. "She's not your spare tire, Rose. She's a person with her own life." Rose shouted back something I couldn't make out, her voice high and defensive. Then a door slammed hard enough to rattle the pictures on my wall. The house went quiet in that particular way that meant everyone had retreated to their corners, angry and hurt and not sure what came next. An hour passed. I spent it staring at my ceiling, replaying every D&D session, every moment with Gail, trying to figure out where the performance ended, and I began. The answer was messier than I wanted it to be. Then came the knock, not soft like Mom's, insistent, demanding. "Go away," I told her, not bothering to get up. She knocked again, harder. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me." The entitlement in her voice, the assumption that I'd eventually give in because I always did, made fresh anger flare up. "Then enjoy standing in the hallway," I shot back. "I'm good at being alone. I've had lots of practice." "That's not fair," Rose said through the door, her voice taking on that wounded tone she used when she wasn't getting her way. "You always had the option to make friends. You chose to hide behind your games and books." The words hit exactly where she'd aimed them. Every insecurity, every moment of self-doubt, weaponized and thrown back at me. I got up and yanked the door open so fast she actually stepped back. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You made sure I knew my place. Every time I tried to be myself, you reminded me how embarrassing I was, how my interests were weird, how I was too much or not enough but never just right. Rose's face was blotchy from crying, mascara smudged under her eyes, but I didn't feel the usual pull to comfort her, to make it better, to smooth things over. I was trying to help you, she insisted, her voice cracking. You were never going to talk to Gail on your own. You can barely order pizza without having a panic attack. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right, because shy, nerdy me could never possibly attract someone without your help. Thanks for proving my point. He knew it was you, Rose protested, desperate now. He liked you anyway. I shook my head slowly. He liked a performance. He liked watching me lie and struggle. That's not the same as liking me. The truth of it sat heavy in my chest, but it was my truth to carry. And you? You don't even see me as a real person. Just an extension of you to use when needed. A backup Rose for the situations you can't be bothered with. The words hung between us like a physical barrier. Rose's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but nothing came out. For maybe the first time in our lives, she had no quick comeback, no charming deflection. Dad appeared in the hallway behind her, his expression harder than I'd ever seen it. Rose, leave your sister alone, now. His voice had that particular edge that meant no arguments, no negotiations, no charm would work. Rose looked between us, her face cycling through emotions like she was trying to find the right one to get her way. This isn't over, she said to me, her voice low and wounded. It is for now, Dad said firmly, stepping aside to let her pass. She stormed off, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. Dad watched her go, then turned to me with sad eyes that made my stomach twist. I'm sorry, kiddo. We should have seen this pattern earlier. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture I recognized from every time he felt overwhelmed at work. Your mom and I, we enabled this dynamic. It's not your fault, I started, but he held up a hand. It is, partly. We thought we were keeping the peace, but we were just teaching Rose that she could use you whenever she needed to. He sighed deeply. We're going to family therapy, all of us. This stops now. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting, but all I felt was exhausted. Years of being the easy twin, the accommodating one, the backup plan, it all sat on my shoulders like wet concrete. That night, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, replaying every interaction with Gail. The way he'd smiled when I solved the escape room puzzles, how his eyes lit up during our Discord sessions. Was any of it real? Or was I just entertainment, a real-life drama playing out for his amusement? My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from him. Can we please talk? I know I messed up. I stared at the message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I swiped it away without responding. Deleted the whole conversation thread. If he couldn't respect that I needed space after one day, how could I trust him with anything else? The next morning at school became an elaborate game of avoidance. I ate lunch in the library, tucked between the dusty philosophy books nobody ever checked out. I took the long route to every class, adding an extra 5 minutes just to avoid the hallways where the D&D club members hung out. When the final bell rang, I slipped out through the back exit by the gym, but Cannon Banks was waiting at my locker the next day, leaning against it with his arms crossed. His face had that serious expression he usually saved for rules disputes during games. We need to talk, he said, and something in his tone made my insides clench. If this is about me not coming to the session, the group took a vote, he interrupted, his voice neutral and careful, about whether you can come back. I pressed my back against the wall of lockers, needing something solid to hold me up. Oh, it was split. Mom dropping truth bombs like she's been saving them up for years. Telling your kid they don't have to forgive their sibling is basically the parenting version of flipping the Monopoly board. Cannon Banks shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Juan Pope and 2 others want you back. They think everyone deserves a second chance. Alberic Morgan and I, we need more time to process this. And one person said absolutely not, no way, never again. The math was clear. I wasn't welcome. The rejection shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. I'd been expecting it, but knowing that people I'd started to think of as friends had voted me out made my eyes burn. I understand, I managed to say, proud that my voice stayed steady. But, Cannon Banks continued, and I looked up sharply. Gail wants to keep you in. As the DM, he gets extra weight in the vote. Anger flared hot and immediate in my chest. I don't want to be there because Gail feels guilty or whatever this is. Cannon Banks nodded slowly. That's what I told him. Look, you're good at the game, really good, but trust matters more than skill. I know. The words came out quiet, almost lost in the noise of students rushing past us to get home. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I really am sorry. Cannon Banks studied me for what felt like forever, his dark eyes searching my face like he was trying to solve a particularly difficult puzzle. Juan Pope showed me the character backstory you wrote for him when he was struggling with his wizard. That was you, right? Not Rose? Yeah, that was me. I remembered staying up until 3 a.m. writing that backstory, weaving Juan Pope's wizard's family history into the campaign world, creating plot hooks the DM could use. He seemed really lost about why his character would even be adventuring. That backstory saved his character and got him excited about playing again, Cannon Banks said, uncrossing his arms. That matters, but so does honesty. If you want to earn back trust, it's going to take time and work, real work. He pushed off from the lockers and started walking away, then paused. Juan Pope's been defending you, by the way. Says anyone who writes 20 pages of notes about someone else's character can't be faking their love for the game. 20 pages. He'd counted. At home, the house felt different. Quieter, but not peaceful. More like the silence after something breaks, when everyone's afraid to move in case they step on the pieces. I was making a turkey sandwich in the kitchen, focusing on spreading mustard evenly like it was the most important task in the world, when Rose appeared in the doorway. You turned them all against me, she said, her voice tight with accusation. Cannon Banks looked at me like I was poisoned today. Alberic Morgan actually moved seats when I sat near him at lunch. I kept layering turkey slices, not looking up. The bread was wheat, slightly stale. I added lettuce anyway. I didn't turn anyone against you, I said, my voice carefully neutral. I told the truth. If that makes you look bad, maybe think about why. You're being so dramatic about this, Rose said, moving closer. I could smell her vanilla perfume, the expensive stuff she saved for special occasions. It was just a little twin swap. We used to do it all the time. I finally looked at her. Really looked. Her makeup was perfect as always, but there were bags under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. When we were 8, Rose, and it was for fun, not so you could use me to do things you thought were beneath you. She flinched at the word beneath, a tiny movement that told me I'd hit something true. I don't think you're beneath me, she protested, but her voice wavered like it did when she was trying to convince herself of something. Really? I set down the mustard knife with deliberate care. Then why did you call my hobbies embarrassing? Why do you only include me in your life when you need something? When's the last time you actually hung out with me just because you wanted to? Rose opened her mouth and closed it. The silence stretched between us like taffy, getting thinner and more fragile the longer it went. I could see her searching her memory, trying to find an answer that wouldn't prove my point. Christmas, she finally said, grabbing onto it like a lifeline. We watched movies at Christmas. I shook my head slowly. You were on your phone the whole time texting your friends about how boring family time was. was. You literally posted a story calling it hostage situation with relatives. Her face went pink. She'd forgotten I could see her stories. Mom walked in then, and the air in the kitchen became so thick with tension you could practically taste it. She looked between us, taking in my defensive posture and Rose's guilty expression. Family therapy, she announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. Tomorrow at 4, not optional. Rose started to protest. But you've been using your sister as an emotional support puppet for years. Mom cut her off, her voice sharp with disappointment. We're going to address it properly this time. That evening, I was halfway through a YouTube video about speedrunning techniques when I heard the doorbell. Then Dad's voice, firm and protective in a way that made my throat tight. She doesn't want to see you, I heard him say through my cracked bedroom door. Gail's voice was muffled, but I caught pieces. Something about misunderstanding, and if she would just let me explain. And frankly, young man, Dad's voice got louder. The fact that you knew she was being deceived and said nothing doesn't sit well with me either. That's not romantic, that's manipulative. Gail mumbled something I couldn't make out. Then footsteps retreating, the door closing with a final click. Dad appeared in my doorway a moment later. You okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He gave me a small smile and closed my door gently, leaving me with my video and the weird hollow feeling in my chest. The next morning, I made a decision. If I was going to lose everything anyway, I might as well try to salvage something on my own terms. The comic shop smelled like it always did. Old paper and that particular plastic scent from collectible figures. Saturday afternoon meant it would be busy, and sure enough, I spotted Juan Pope by the miniatures display, holding a tiny dragon up to the light. When he saw me, his whole body went rigid. The dragon slipped from his fingers, clattering on the glass counter. Hi, I said, stopping a safe distance away. My hands were sweating, but I forced myself to stay put. I'm not here to push or make things weird. I wanted to give you this. I pulled the notebook from my bag, the one with the worn cover and coffee stains. His name was written on the front in my careful handwriting. What is it? Juan Pope asked, wariness clear in every line of his body. I fidgeted with my sleeve, pulling at a loose thread. Campaign notes. All the stuff I wrote about your character, plot theories, item combinations that might help. Even if I can't play anymore, I wanted you to have them. Your character deserves to finish his arc. Juan Pope took the notebook slowly, like it might bite him. He flipped it open to a random page, and his eyes widened. Then he turned another page, and another. You really did care about the game, he said, his voice soft with something like wonder. This is like 20 pages of notes just about my character's family history. And here, you drew a family tree with potential plot connections. Heat crept up my neck. I like world building, and your character had such potential for growth. The whole thing with his sister being missing, there were so many directions that could go. Juan Pope looked at me for a long moment, really looked at me. Not like I was Rose's weird twin or the girl who lied to everyone, but like he was seeing me for the first time. I'll talk to Canon Banks, he said finally. Maybe we can figure something out. You don't have to. Your notes got me through my character's worst crisis, he interrupted. That was real. Whatever else happened, that was real. Monday at 4 o'clock found us in a beige office that smelled like lavender and looked like it was designed to be aggressively non-threatening. Motivational posters with sunsets, a white noise machine humming in the corner. Rose sat as far from me as the small room would allow, examining her nails like they held the secrets of the universe. The therapist, a woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled into a bun, introduced herself as Dr. Martinez. So, she said, settling into her chair with a yellow legal pad. Who wants to start by explaining why we're here? Rose jumped in immediately, her voice taking on that performed quality she used with teachers. There was a misunderstanding about a boy, and now everyone's acting like I committed some huge crime. It was just a harmless prank that went a little sideways. Dr. Martinez made a note, her expression neutral. A harmless prank, and how do you see it? She looked at me. I took a breath, trying to organize years of accumulated hurt into something coherent. She's been using me as her substitute for years. Every time something was too hard or too embarrassing or too boring for her, she'd send me instead. Can you give me some examples? Dr. Martinez asked gently. So I did. The gynecologist appointments Rose found too awkward. The family dinners she wanted to skip. The study groups where she needed someone to take notes while she went to parties. The job interviews she was too nervous to attend. The list kept going, each example making Rose sink lower in her chair. That time you had me pretend to be you at your volunteer orientation because you wanted to go to the beach, I continued, my voice getting stronger. The 3 times you made me take your driving test because you kept failing. The parent-teacher conference where you needed someone who wouldn't get defensive. Those were different, Rose started. The college interview, I said, and she went pale. You made me do your alumni interview because you said you'd panic. There's something curious about how Canon Banks delivers this news, standing by lockers like it's just casual hallway talk when he's basically deciding someone's social fate. The way he lists each vote feels oddly formal for what should be a friend group discussion. But really, you just wanted to go to that party. Dr. Martinez had stopped writing, her pen suspended over the paper. Rose, do you understand why your sister feels used? Rose crossed her arms, her defensive posture familiar from every time she'd been called out on something. I guess, but she never said no. Did you ever give her a real choice? Dr. Martinez asked carefully. Or did you assume she'd comply because she always has? The question hung in the air. Rose's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For maybe the first time in our lives, she had no quick comeback, no charming deflection. She's my twin, Rose finally said, but it sounded weak even to her. We're supposed to help each other. Help is mutual, Dr. Martinez said. What you're describing sounds more like one person serving another's needs without reciprocation. Mom, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. Rose, when was the last time you did something for your sister? Not with her, for her? Another silence. Rose's fingers tapped against her thigh, that nervous tell she didn't know she had. I need space, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not just Rose's backup plan. Rose's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, not the kind she could summon on command. But for once, I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't apologize for making her cry. I just sat there, holding my boundary like a shield. That's a very reasonable request, Dr. Martinez said. Rose, you need to respect that. No contact until your sister is ready. But, Rose started. No contact, Dr. Martinez repeated firmly. Your sister is setting a boundary. Respecting it is the first step in rebuilding trust, if that's even possible. The rest of the session passed in a blur of Rose's tears, Mom's quiet disappointment, and Dad's barely contained frustration. But I felt something shifting inside me, like a bone settling back into place after being dislocated. Over the next week, I did something revolutionary. I stopped hiding. I still ate lunch alone, but I brought my food to the courtyard instead of the library. I sat on the benches under the oak tree, reading my manga in full view of anyone who walked by. Let them see me enjoying weird cartoon corn, as Rose once called it. I worked on my fan fiction during free period, not minimizing the document when people passed. fast. 17 chapters of a story where the side character finally got to be the hero. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Wednesday night, I entered an online Pokemon tournament with my real username, not the anonymous one I'd been using for years. My shiny Umbreon swept through the first 3 rounds. It felt like winning at being myself. Thursday after school, I was organizing my locker when Cannon Banks appeared again. This time, his expression was different. Less stern, more curious. Juan Pope showed me the notes, he said without preamble, all 20 pages of them. I closed my locker carefully, giving myself time to prepare for another rejection. Okay, also, he continued, pulling out his phone. Alberic Morgan found your Reddit account, the one where you've been helping newbie players with character builds for like 2 years. You have over 300 posts, all detailed guides and patient explanations. Heat flooded my face. That account was supposed to be anonymous. That's just something I do for fun. Cannon Banks shook his head slowly. It's more than that. You've helped dozens of people love the game. There's a whole thread of people sharing stories about how your advice saved their first campaign. I didn't know what to say to that. The Reddit account had been my safe space, where I could be helpful without anyone knowing who I was, where I could be valuable without being Rose's sister. The group wants to meet with you, Cannon Banks said. Not to play, just to talk. Clear the air. Figure out if there's a way forward. My heart did something complicated in my chest. Really? He nodded. Saturday, neutral ground at the coffee shop on 5th Street, 2 o'clock. He paused, then added, Gale won't be there. We voted him out of this meeting. The last part surprised me. You voted him out? His behavior was problematic too, Cannon Banks said simply. Knowing someone is being deceived and playing along for your own entertainment isn't okay. We're dealing with one issue at a time. Saturday came too fast and too slow simultaneously. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and my most neutral t-shirt. Not trying too hard, not hiding either. The coffee shop was busy enough to provide white noise, but not so crowded we couldn't hear each other. I found them in the back corner. Cannon Banks, Alberic Morgan, Juan Pope, and 2 other members whose names I'd never quite caught during sessions. The atmosphere was tense enough to cut with a dice sword. Alberic Morgan started without preamble, his notebook already open. We want to understand why you thought lying to us was acceptable. So I told them everything. Not the polished version I'd prepared in my head, but the messy truth. About Rose, about years of being her substitute, about wanting so desperately to belong somewhere that I'd convinced myself the lie was worth it. She's used me as her stand-in since we were kids, I said, staring at my untouched latte. Every time something was too hard or too uncomfortable or too far beneath her social status. And I kept saying yes because I thought that's what sisters did. That's messed up, one of the members said, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. Your sister sounds toxic. The word toxic hit like a slap. I wanted to defend Rose out of habit, that automatic response trained by years of twin loyalty. But I stopped myself, swallowed the defense that would have been another lie. Yeah, I agreed quietly. She kind of is. I'm working on setting boundaries. Alberic Morgan pulled out a fresh page in his notebook, his mechanical pencil clicking. If you come back, we have conditions. Anything, I said too quickly, then forced myself to slow down. I mean, yes, I'm listening. First, full transparency. No more lies, even small ones. If you're having a bad day, say so. Don't pretend everything's fine. Alberic Morgan's pencil moved across the page in his neat handwriting. Second, you sit out the current campaign finale. You haven't earned that. That stung, but it was fair. I nodded. Third, he continued. If you're in as yourself. Not as Rose's sister, not as anyone else. We want to know who you actually are. Yes, I said immediately. All of that. Yes. Cannon Banks leaned forward. And Gale doesn't get to override group decisions about you anymore. This isn't his call. What about Gale? I asked hesitantly, not sure I wanted to know the answer. Juan Pope shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his coffee cup scraping against the saucer. That's complicated. He says he's had feelings for you for years, but the way he handled this was creepy. We're still figuring out if he stays as DM. He knew who you really were and didn't say anything, the other member added, speaking for the first time. That's like informed consent issues. It's gross. The fact that they saw it, that they understood why Gale's behavior was wrong without me having to explain it, meant more than I could express. My throat got tight with unexpected emotion. We're not saying you're forgiven, Alberic Morgan clarified, clicking his pencil again. Trust takes time to rebuild, but we're willing to try if you are. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Juan Pope pushed a napkin across the table toward me, and I realized my eyes were leaking. Not full crying, just overflow. Thanks, I managed. For giving me a chance, for seeing that it's complicated. Everything's complicated, the quiet member said with a shrug. Doesn't mean we can't work through it. I went home feeling lighter but uncertain, like I was walking on ground that might shift at any moment. The house was quiet when I walked in, but Mom called me into the living room before I could escape to my room. Rose was there, sitting in the armchair with her hands folded in her lap. She looked smaller somehow, deflated. Mom and Dad flanked her like guards. Family meeting, Dad said, his tone making it clear this wasn't optional. Rose has something to say. Rose looked up at me, and I could see she'd been crying. Her makeup was gone, leaving her face naked and young-looking. I'm sorry, she said, but the words sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the mirror. The therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies, and I use you to avoid consequences. The clinical language, the way she said it like she was reporting someone else's diagnosis rather than owning her behavior, made my jaw clench. And? Mom prompted, her voice carrying an edge of frustration. Rose sighed, the put-upon sound of someone being forced to do homework. And I'm going to individual therapy to work on it. And I'm not allowed to ask you for any favors for at least 6 months. And I have to respect your boundaries. She looked at me with frustration clear in every line of her face. This is really hard for me. A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. Yeah, Rose, being treated like a person instead of a prop is really hard for me too. That night, Gale texted again. Please, just 5 minutes, I need to explain. The notification glowed on my phone screen while I sat cross-legged on my bed. Homework spread out around me but forgotten. 5 minutes. He wanted 5 minutes after watching me unknowingly perform for him for 3 years. My thumbs moved across the keyboard before I could second-guess myself. You watched me for 3 years and never just talked to me. That's not romantic, it's creepy. Leave me alone. I hit the block button while the typing indicator was still pulsing. The small action felt enormous, like closing a door I'd been too polite to shut before. Cannon Banks pulling out receipts like a detective solving the case of the century. 300 Reddit posts helping newbies. Girl's been running a secret charity for nerds while thinking she's worthless. Thursday arrived with a weight of anticipation sitting heavy in my stomach. The D&D room looked exactly the same tables pushed together, same character sheets and dice scattered across surfaces, same smell of markers and old carpet, but everything felt different when I walked through the door. Conversations died mid-sentence, dice stopped rolling. Everyone turned to look at me standing in the doorway with my old dice bag clutched in my hand like a lifeline. One of the other members sat behind the DM screen now, his notebook open to pages covered in sticky notes. notes. Gale occupied a regular player spot at the far end, his eyes fixed on his character sheet like it contained the secrets of the universe. I chose a chair near the door, close enough to be part of the group, but far enough to make my status clear. I'm here to observe, I said, the words coming out quieter than I'd intended. If that's okay. Cannon Banks gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. We're running a one-shot today. You can watch. The session unfolded with all the comfort of wearing wet socks. Everyone kept glancing at me between dice rolls, their roleplay stilted and self-conscious. The new DM tried to maintain energy, describing a haunted lighthouse with enthusiasm, but even he kept checking my face for reactions. When he called for a 10-minute break after the first combat encounter, people scattered to refill drinks and stretch. I stayed in my chair, pretending to study the battle map, counting squares and memorizing positions I wouldn't need to know. You blocked me. Gale stood beside my chair, his accusation hanging in the air like a failed spell save. I kept my eyes on the miniatures, noting how someone had painted tiny runes on the wizard's robes. Yeah, because you wouldn't leave me alone after I asked for space. The words came out measured, controlled. I finally looked up at him. That's a boundary. Learn to respect them. His face crumpled slightly, like I'd rolled critical damage on an attack he hadn't seen coming. I thought we had something special. We had you watching me perform without my knowledge. Each word felt necessary, like components for a spell I was finally casting correctly. That's not special. It's invasive. She asked for space, dude. Back off. Juan Pope materialized beside me, his usually cheerful face set in hard lines. The solidarity from him, after everything I'd put the group through, made my throat constrict with unexpected gratitude. Gale retreated to his end of the table, and the session resumed with marginally less tension. I stayed for the whole game, watching quietly, learning the new dynamics, understanding my place in this shifted landscape. The following weeks became an exercise in patience and consistency. I arrived early to help set up tables. I organized the miniature collection that had devolved into chaos. I brought homemade cookies, chocolate chip, nothing fancy, and left them on the table without fanfare. Small acts that said, I'm here, I'm trying, without demanding forgiveness. Rose's texts arrived like clockwork every few days. Miss you. Saw a meme you'd like. Mom's making your favorite dinner. Each message a tiny test, a finger poking at the boundary I'd built. Dr. Martinez called it checking for weak spots, and said my job was to stay consistent. So I did. Read, don't respond. Read, don't respond. It felt like practicing scales on an instrument I was still learning to play. You're making good progress, Dr. Martinez told me during our individual session, her yellow legal pad filled with notes I couldn't read upside down. How does it feel? Like I'm trying to rebuild a house during an earthquake, I admitted, picking at a loose thread on the couch cushion. Everything keeps shifting. I don't know what solid ground feels like anymore. She nodded, making another note. That's normal. You're relearning fundamental patterns. It's supposed to feel unstable. A month crawled by before the group called another vote. This time, they gathered at the comic shop on neutral territory, the decision too important for the D&D room's associations. I waited at home, refreshing my phone every 30 seconds, even though I'd turned off notifications to preserve my sanity. The text from Cannon Banks was simple. You're in. New campaign starts next week. But when I arrived for the first session of the new campaign, Alberic Morgan had a contract. An actual printed contract with terms and conditions and a signature line at the bottom. Any lies, even small ones, and you're out permanently, he explained, pushing his glasses up as he handed me the paper. This includes lies of omission, half-truths, and what my mom calls creative interpretations of reality. I signed immediately, my name looking strange and formal on the official-looking document. The chance to start fresh, to be myself without pretense, felt worth any conditions they wanted to impose. 3 weeks into the new campaign, I was walking to first period when Rose appeared beside my locker, holding 2 cups from the expensive coffee place downtown. My favorite order, the one with too much caramel that she always called diabetes in a cup. I'm not asking for anything, she said in a rush, the words tumbling over each other. I missed you. I accepted the cup but kept my expression neutral, a skill I'd been practicing in the mirror. The coffee was exactly right. She'd even remembered to ask for oat milk. I missed who we used to be, I told her, the honesty of it sitting strange in my mouth. Before you decided I was just your understudy. Her face did something complicated, cycling through emotions too fast to track before settling on something that might have been genuine sadness. Yeah, me too. She walked away without pushing for more, which Dr. Martinez would probably call progress. The coffee tasted like nostalgia and regret. The new campaign began with character creation, everyone building fresh starts from scratch, while others debated between rogues and rangers. I knew exactly what I wanted to play. This is Greta, I announced, holding up my character sheet. She's a half-orc librarian with anxiety who collects pressed flowers and is searching for her missing mentor. The quiet member snorted, then covered it with a cough. The new DM grinned behind his screen. Cannon Banks actually chuckled, a rare sound that made everyone turn to look. Write what you know, huh? He said, but his tone held warmth I hadn't heard in months. She has a +12 to organizing things alphabetically, I added, which got a genuine laugh from the table. As the session progressed, something shifted inside my chest. When Greta failed an intimidation check spectacularly, I laughed at my own terrible roll. When she successfully identified an ancient text, I didn't downplay my excitement. I wasn't calculating what Rose would do, wasn't monitoring reactions, wasn't performing a version of myself I thought would be acceptable. I was just playing, just existing, just being. The feeling was terrifying and wonderful, like jumping into water without checking the depth first, but finding you could swim after all. 3 months slipped by in a rhythm of weekly sessions, careful boundaries, and slow reconstruction. Greta had gained 2 levels, a magical sword that glowed when lies were told nearby, the group found this hilarious, and an adopted pseudo-dragon named Herbert. I was flipping through the new releases at the comic shop, debating whether my budget could handle the latest volume of my favorite series, when the bell above the door chimed. Gale stood in the doorway, his hand still on the handle like he was considering backing right out again. We'd managed to exist in the same space at D&D for months now, occupying opposite ends of the table like magnets with matching poles, polite but distant. Hi, he said, the word careful and contained. Hi, I responded, matching his tone exactly. He moved toward the counter, maintaining a careful distance like I was a wild animal that might bolt. I'm sorry for all of it. I thought I was being patient, but I was being creepy. I'm working on it. The apology sat between us, not asking for anything, not demanding response, just existing, like a fact we both had to acknowledge. I gave him a single nod. Good, keep working. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't friendship, it was acknowledgement that people could change, could recognize their mistakes, could try to be better. For now, that had to be enough. Rose and I still existed in parallel lines that rarely intersected. She'd text pictures of things that reminded her of me, a D&D meme, a photo of my favorite candy at the store, a sunset that looked like dice. I saved them all in a folder labeled maybe someday, but never never responded. The group still watched me sometimes, little glances during sessions like they were checking to make sure I was really there, really me. Trust was growing back like a plant from a seed, slow and fragile but undeniably alive. And me? I was learning the shape of my own thoughts when they weren't filtered through someone else's expectations, learning that I could be anxious and brave at the same time, learning that Greta the half-orc librarian and I had more in common than just anxiety. We both believed in the power of organization, the comfort of knowledge, and the radical act of taking up space in the world. She wasn't perfect, she wasn't fixed, she wasn't even sure what better looked like yet, but she was real, and she was mine, and that was something worth rolling the dice for. Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks for letting me wonder through all this right alongside you. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.